Morning, everyone. It's 9:30. Welcome to Science, Technology, and Energy for November 6th, 2023. We have a fairly full agenda for the day. We're going to begin in just a few minutes with a public hearing on House Bill 458, to which a non-germane amendment will be proposed later. And this public hearing is on that non-germane amendment. Following the public hearing, we will have a brief 5-minute recess, and then at 10 o'clock, we will begin an executive session on 12 retained bills. And that executive session will last as long as it needs to for us to get through all 12 bills. As is our usual custom, we'll begin this meeting by all rising and joining with Representative Doug Thomas as he leads us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before I officially convene the public hearing, I want to introduce the newest member of Science, Technology, and Energy. Representative Stephen Kennedy is going to be joining us for the next year on the committee. He replaces Representative Troy Murner, who resigned his seat in the House. So I'd ask us Representative Kennedy to introduce himself briefly, tell us where he's from, and a little bit about his background. Representative Kennedy.
Thanks, Michael. I'm representing Hudson, District 13. I'm a retired scientist. My area was chemical physics, but I've worked in many different fields, which says something about my personality. But the last 15 years, I was working mostly in medicine. So that's the brief picture of who I represent and my background.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Since he does not know most of us, I'd like each of us to introduce ourselves, starting with Representative Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is James Summers. I represent Rockingham District 20. That's Plaistow, Southampton, and Newton. And this is my second non-concurrent term on this committee. And I've come from the trade of, I was in the U.S. Navy. I was a nuclear engineer. And then for the last 20 years or so, I've been a network engineer and run my own network engineering company. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
My name is Representative Lex Berezny. I represent Grafton District 11, and the last 20 years I've been a software developer.
Hi, I'm Chris Munns. I am a representative from Rockingham County District 29, which is the town of Hampton. This is my second non-concurrent term as well. I spent most of my professional career working in the private sector and business, and spent 5 years in the nonprofit segment running a nonprofit agency.
Good morning and welcome aboard. I'm Mike Harrington. I represent Stratford District 18. This is my, I don't know, seventh term on this, sixth term maybe on this committee, but they were not concurrent because in the middle there, I was a PUC commissioner. And before all the state stuff, I'm a nuclear engineer and I worked as a supervisor at Seabrook Nuclear Plant for over 20 years.
Hi, welcome. Doug Thomas, Rockingham County 16, which comprises just the town of Londonderry. In my fifth term, previously I was U.S. Air Force, munitions maintenance area, and also worked for many years at Hanscom Air Force Base in the acquisition, program management, logistics world.
Representative Michael Vose, Rockingham District 5, the town of Epping, chair of the Epping Planning Board, as well as chair of this committee.
JD Bernardi, Rockingham 36, with Hampton Falls, Kensington, Southampton, Newton, and Plastow. Background biochemist, Navy nuclear engineer, attorney, and worked in pharmaceutical development.
I'm Janine Nodder, your seatmate. I represent the town of Merrimack. This is my 7th term, and our late speaker, Dick Hinch, put me on this committee 5 terms ago, and I've been here ever since.
John Lewicki, I represent Mason, Greenville, and Brookline. This is my 3rd non-consecutive term. My background is that mostly I have worked in industry startups doing systems and electrical engineering, and that's it.
Henry Noel, COOS 5, Berlin. I retired from the city of Berlin as the wastewater treatment plant superintendent.
Tom Corman, Grafton 15, which is Ward 3 of the City of Lebanon. I am a retired computer science professor from Dartmouth, where I taught for 29 and a half years. I'm co-author of the leading textbook on computer algorithms. I chaired the computer science department for 6 years at Dartmouth and also directed the writing program for 4 years. And this is my first term in the House.
Tom Ploget, Belknap 1. That's New Hampton and Center Harbor. This is my 2nd term, both with the ST&E. The background is chemical research, analytical synthesis in a chemical research facility in Union, Connecticut. I'm sorry, chemicals.
Welcome. I'm Wendy Thomas. I represent the town of Merrimack. I have experience as a clinical microbiologist and executive director of a nonprofit. I've worked in energy efficiency, and I'm one of the water warriors in Merrimack that's fighting our PFAS problem from Saint-Gobain. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for that quick introduction, and welcome once again to Representative Stephen Kennedy. With that, I will open a public hearing on a non-germane amendment to House Bill 458 relative to reestablishing the Commission to study the assessing of power generation. And I will recognize Representative Tom Corman to introduce this amendment. Representative Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2022, HB 410 was passed. It became RSA 72-8-F, establishing the Study Commission on the Assessing of Power Generation and Utility Transmission. By assessing, we mean how to assess these facilities for tax purposes, both state and municipal. HB 410 specified that the commission would contain 3 House members, at least 1 from this committee and at least 1 from Ways and Means, along with 1 senator and 6 members from outside the legislature. The commission met for the first time in July of 22 and quickly determined that it would have its hands full focusing on just assessing power generation, so it put off assessing how to assess transmission. HB 410 specified that the commission would disband on November 1st of 2022. The commission had not quite finished its work by then. Its final report, filed on October 27, 22, recommended that a bill be filed to continue the commission. That bill was SB 225 from earlier this year. It reconstituted the commission with an end date of November 1st of this year, and it also made changes to the membership. 1 member of the public was added to be appointed by the governor, making 7 non-legislative members. That public member was intended to be the Honorable Pat Abrami, who had been chair of the commission in 22. Per RSA 1449, the majority of the commission must comprise legislators, and so SB 225 specified 6 House members, at least 1 from this committee, at least 1 from Ways and Means, and 2 senators. The House members appointed were 2 from Ways and Means, David Rochefort and Richard Ames, and 4 from this committee, Tom Ploget, Chris Munns, James Summers, and myself. The reconstituted commission met for the first time on September 25th of this year, giving it just a little more than 1 month to conclude its business, and that was just not enough time. And moreover, there was a mix-up occurring with Pat Abrami chairing the commission at its first two meetings, but it turned out that apparently he was not the governor's appointee, Lisa Shapiro was, so Senator Tim Lang ended up chairing the commission. This non-germane amendment to HB 458 continues the commission with two changes to SB 225. First is that the end date becomes November 1st of 2024, and the second is that the 6 House members would be 2 from this committee, 2 from Ways and Means, and 2 from municipal and county government. We wanted to reduce the number of ST&E members because this commission is not about energy as much as it's about how to assess taxes on power generators. 2 Ways and Means members make sense in this context, and also 2 municipal and county government members make sense because these facilities are paying municipal taxes.
Thank you, Representative Corman. Any questions for Representative Corman about this amendment? Seeing none, thank you for that. I'll next call on Representative Pat Abrami to make some very brief comments about continuing this study commission. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Mr.
Former
Chair.
Representative Abrami.
Yes, this commission has had quite a journey. We had very great success several years ago with the taxing of municipal taxing of utility assets, and that's in place now. And we solved a big problem, a 40-year problem with that. Then the power generator folks approached us. There's 59 power generating facilities in the state, from the smallest dam to Seabrook nuclear power plant. We formed a commission last year, as was said. We ran out of time, but we were making progress. Everybody in that commission, there's three other than legislators, there's 3 constituencies. The municipalities are represented, the power generator people are represented, and the assessing communities is represented. And the goal of this commission is very specific. We got to get all those 3 groups to agree on a solution. And that's what we did with transmission. We're trying to do this again. The bill that came out this year to continue the commission came out late, and we were only able to meet 3 times, and not enough time, although all those constituencies felt that we're making progress again, and that we wanted to find a way to fast track getting, because the error we made last time was we put the end date as November 1st of 23. So what this amendment does is it does 2 basic things. It extends the date now to November 1st of 24, and it changes as it was mentioned, it changes the mix because some of the science and tech folks said, we really don't know this assessing stuff. What I did in the interim that wasn't said was I chatted with Representative Turcourt, the chair of municipal. I said, can you find me two people who understand something about municipal taxing? And he got back to me after his flight to Europe, and he's a pilot. He came back the next week to me and said, yes, I found 2 good people that we will assign to this commission. So that's what I wanted to add to what was said, and I hope you do pass this amendment so we can proceed where we left off. The goal is to, with you doing it this way, is that this will be voted on in first week of January. Senator Lang said he will help us fast track it through the Senate so that we can get working as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Pat Abrami. Any questions for Mr. Abrami? Representative Wendy Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you may not have the answer to this because I'm not quite sure how much you were involved with this amendment. However, on line 19, it talks about confidential data reporting. Can you explain what that is?
Well, that's one of the issues that we're going to be addressing. Right now, the assessing data that the municipalities say they need to properly assess these is not available to them because of confidentiality. And that's one of the issues that we've been discussing, and we need to continue to discuss. Other states do allow, not just for utilities, but for any other properties. And that's the stumbling block we have. How can we do it just for utility, for power generators to allow them to share the information? Now, when they go to court, which a lot of these do wind up in court, guess what? It's open. All the data is shared. But again, this is one of the things we're talking about. There's no resolution to it yet, but we're having very good, again, we have the right people in the room to have this conversation, and we want to continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Ploget has a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Brownby. Just housekeeping that the RSA and in this amendment on line 25, it's the speaker that will appoint the two. And just so we don't have another mix-up, as you witnessed yourself, if the speaker will be appointing Representative Turks.
Yeah, what was your last sentence? Representing, appointing who? Or?
Ways and Means will suggest to, and the speaker will appoint them. We need the speaker to appoint them and make it official.
Oh, yes. No,
I
no.
just want to make sure that's.
The speaker does appoint, and his deputy is the one that actually does the appointing. And we will give them a heads up as to, our hope is that all the people who are on the commission now will be reappointed. The only, the Ways and Means people, I think we have two that we will, they are looking for names, believe me. They go to chairs and say, who do you have? So we'll get the two municipal ones that Representative Turcott talked about. Ways and Means is fine with what they have. And then I think among the four here, I know several of you said you felt uncomfortable. So hopefully you'll let the chair know if you're still interested in being on this commission, because they do reach out to the chairs looking for members to these commissions. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Representative Harrington.
More of a clarification than a question. You question on confidentiality. A lot of since we have a competitive power market in New England, the generators don't publish how much they generate and when. So because this has to do with what they bid in the day ahead in real-time markets as well as the capacity markets. Of course, for the biggest one, Seabrook, all you have to do is go to the NRC Daily Report and they'll tell you exactly what they're putting out every day, but they still consider the information confidential. That's what they're referring to.
And it turns out Seabrook is negotiated anyway at the end. It's a negotiated thing, so.
Representative Wendy Thomas.
This is in response to that comment. Do you want me to wait until we exec it or anything? I just, so I'm a little hung up on this.
If you have a question, go ahead and ask it.
No, I don't have a question.
If it's just a comment, let's hold it.
Well, it's a comment wrapped up in a question. I still don't understand the confidentiality. I mean, if and this is addressed to Representative Harrington because of what you just said. So they're withholding that information because they want a better price. Is that the reason?
Well, it's considered confidential because they're in a competitive market, and every day the price, I mean, as we sit here right now, there's a day ahead price that was set yesterday, and there's a real-time price that's set in real time. Those vary based on how many people bid in at what price. So if someone, for example, has a maintenance outage and they're going to reduce their power by 20%, that will change what they bid in, and that may push the price of the real-time market up or down. So those are facts they don't want the public to know in advance. Basically, they're competitors. It's not so much they don't want you to know, they don't want the other generators to know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, there's one last person who would like to speak to us about this non-germane amendment. That's James Monahan, here to representing the New England Power Generators Association. Mr. Monahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you said, I'm Jim Monahan with the DuPont Group. I'm here today on behalf of the New England Power Generators Association. We've kind of been a moving party on this for the last couple of years to try to get support to address an ongoing problem, kind of a post-divestiture restructuring issue. The power generators in New Hampshire, as this committee is well aware, are not regulated entities. They operate just like any other manufacturer. The problem is that they're taxed twice. Unlike every other manufacturer in the state, they pay a state utility property tax, and they also pay a local property tax. What we're trying to do here is coordinate and centralize that activity. So first of all, there's not two valuations, and that's become a pretty conspicuous problem where the valuation from the state for an individual plant might be half of, or sometimes even more dramatic than how the local entity values it. So the first task at hand is to address this central issue of whether or not unregulated manufacturers who are not utilities should pay the utility property tax. The other issue is when it comes to the local valuation, what type of agreed upon formula should be put together so there's some consistency community to community with how the power plants are taxed, which seems simple enough, but when you start unwinding things here, for example, because the power plants pay the utility property tax, they don't pay the statewide property tax. And this essential question, well, maybe it would be more efficient to move education dollars from the power plants through the statewide property tax as opposed to making a utility property tax, which goes into the education trust fund. So I think that's why this matter is, those complications suggest that it may be prudent to use the commission to sort through some of these issues so that when legislation is advanced on these two topics, there's kind of been that deep work that's underway. I should say the other important party to this that Representative Abrami didn't mention is the Department of Revenue Administration. They are very involved in this. They've been a great resource. They can produce more spreadsheets than you can believe, but they're part of the team as well. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. Mr. Monahan, any questions for Mr. Monahan? Seeing none, I will thank you very much for your participation and ask if there is anyone else in attendance who would like to speak on this non-germane amendment. Seeing none, I'm going to close this public hearing on the non-germane amendment to House Bill 458. This committee will be in recess until 10 o'clock, at which time we will take up in executive session the 12 bills that we retained earlier this year. We'll see you at 10 o'clock. Let's take our seats, everybody, so we can get started. Okay, good morning and welcome to the second part of the ST&E meeting for November 6th, 2023. Today, from this point on, we'll be doing executive sessions on 12 retained bills. Before we start, we'd like to welcome to the committee for the day Representative Angela Brennan, who is here substituting for Ned Reynolds, who couldn't be with us today. And at our public hearing, which started at 9:30, I introduced to the members of the committee who were so assembled at that time, our newest member, Representative Stephen Kennedy, who is replacing Representative Troy Murner on the committee. Representative Kennedy introduced himself to the committee earlier. If you weren't here and you would like to make a contact with him and learn a little bit about him, please do so later in the day. So with that, we're going to begin our business for the day. And I'm going to open an exec session on House Bill 159. And I'm going to recognize Representative Bernardi for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to ITL HB 159.
I recognize Representative Summers.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we ITL House Bill 159. Now, House Bill 159 was the subject of a subcommittee, which was led by Representative Bernardi, so I'll ask him to comment on the subcommittee's activities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the subcommittee met. In the subcommittee, we agreed that ITLing the current bill was the right action. And we also had discussed that ideally we would substitute a LSR, which I have in the system, which was going to direct utilities to use laddering activities or purchase power agreements that are not every 6 months, but at broader or intervals and contracts that were short, medium, and long term in duration. When the bill came back from OLS to me, it was not quite ready, so I have sent it back for further work. And since that time, I've also received comments from Representative Munns, Representative McGee, Michael Akata of Eversource, making suggestions. So when it comes back from from OLS again, I expect I may tweak it yet one more time before it's finally signed off. All that being said is this amendment and any proposed amendment to this is not ready for prime time.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor of ITL for House Bill 159. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask Representative Harrington.
Just one quick thing we shouldn't forget on this bill is that an issue was raised that it was unconstitutional, which I agree it is. So we should always keep that in mind.
Okay, further comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL for House Bill 159.
Doug Thomas.
Yes.
Janine Nodder.
Yes.
Michael Harrington.
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy.
Yes.
John Lewicki.
Yes.
Lex Berejny.
Yes.
J.D. Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget.
Yes.
James Summers.
Yes.
Kat McGee.
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams.
Yes.
Jackie Cretion. Oh, go on. Sorry. Lucius Partial.
Yes.
Tony Kaplan.
Yes.
Chris Munns.
Yes.
Henry Noel.
Yes.
Wendy Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas Corman.
Yes.
Angela Brennan.
Yes.
19 to 0.
you didn't
Oh,
ask.
Chairman Bose.
Yes.
Excuse me. Now 19 to 0.
Okay, by a vote of 19 to 0, we judge HB 159 to be worthy of ITL. And without objection, I'd like to place it on the consent calendar.
Without objection.
Do you object?
No, without objection.
Okay. No objections then. House Bill 159 will go on to the consent calendar. And that ends the exec session for House Bill 159. Now we'll move on to an exec session for House Bill 166
Mr.
relative
Chairman?
to the
I'd like to know who will write the report.
Representative Bernardi will write the report. HB 166 is relative to the elimination of useful thermal energy from renewable energy classes. And I'd like to recognize Representative Thomas for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I motion ITL.
I recognize Representative Berejny.
I second the ITL motion on HB 166.
It's been moved and seconded that we ITL House Bill 166. Representative Thomas, do you have any discussion of that motion?
Just that this has been done many times and it just doesn't, it's not ready. Something that we don't think it's a good idea at this time.
Any further discussion on the motion of ITL for HB 166? Representative Harrington.
Yeah, I'm not going to give a long, drawn-out speech here because I know this is going to be passed as ITL, but people should just remember, useful thermal energy has absolutely nothing to do with the reducing the amount of electricity that's used. But why electric ratepayers are having to pay higher electric bills so that some entity can burn wood in their furnace is beyond me. It's just a total disconnect. What's going to be next? We're going to put the ratepayers and say, well, I think this is a good idea. Maybe we should have free milk for everybody that's under 4 years old. So we're going to give them all free milk, and the ratepayers will pay for it. This has nothing to do with electricity. It's just subsidizing people, and basically the reason it passes is because the people who sells wood chips have a real good lobbyist. So I think this is, and now, of course, we've got government entities, counties that have gone out and taken advantage of this. So it's a program that once you start it, once you create the beast, it keeps eating, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And regretfully, that's what's going to happen with this program.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL on House Bill 166.
Doug Thomas.
Yes.
Janine Nodder.
Yes.
Michael Harrington.
No.
Stephen Kennedy.
Yes.
John Lewicki.
Yes.
Lex Berejny.
Yes.
J.D. Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget.
Yes.
James Summers.
Yes.
Kat McGee.
Is this an ITL motion?
ITL.
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams.
Yes.
Jackie Cretion.
Yes.
Lucius Partial.
Yes.
Tony Kaplan.
Yes.
Chris Munns.
Yes.
Henry Noel.
Yes.
Wendy Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas Corman.
Yes.
Angela Brennan.
Yes.
Chairman Bose.
Yes.
19 to 1.
By a count of 19 to 1, the committee judges this bill to be worthy of ITL. And Representative Thomas will be writing the report for the
Douglas Thomas.
calendar. Doug Thomas, that is, of course. And this will not go on the consent calendar. So this will be on the regular calendar. And with that, we'll close that exec session and open the next exec session, which is HB 175, relative to the state's energy consumption reduction goal. And on this bill, I recognize Representative Nodder for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move ITL.
I recognize Representative Ploget.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded that we ITL HB 175. Representative Ploget, did you have anything to say about this?
Thank you, Chair. This this came up twice before. It's been voted ITL. I believe the online polling were all against it, maybe 40-0. So I recommend we continue, not continue this any further. Thank you.
Representative Harrington.
Yeah, this was done at the request of the Department of Energy, asked me to put this bill in, and I still think it makes sense, because if the goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that's more encompassing than saying fossil fuel consumption. So you could reduce fossil fuel consumption and not necessarily, there's other things that you can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that don't involve fossil fuel. So I think it's a pretty good idea, but I'm not going to bother fighting it if no one else wants it. I think the Department of Energy seems to have lost their enthusiasm for it, so I'll be voting ITL.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL on HB 175.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Kat McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Partial,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bose,
Yes.
20-0.
So by a vote of 20 to nothing, HB 175 is judged to be worthy of ITL. Without objection, we'll put this on the consent calendar. Hearing no objections, it will go on the consent calendar, and Representative Nodder will write the committee report. With that, we'll close the executive session on House Bill 175 and open an executive session on House Bill 176 relative to rules of the Site Evaluation Committee. And before I entertain a motion on this bill, I want to relay a conversation I had with the House clerk about the proper way to motion a bill that you plan to amend. The clerk tells me that the proper motion is I move ought to pass as amended on HB blah, blah, blah. And then the same person offers an amendment. So the motion would be, Mr. Chairman, I move ought to pass as amended on House Bill, in this case 176, and offer amendment number and then the amendment number. So that's the proper way to do this. And with that, I recognize Representative Harrington for a motion.
Motion that we approve HB 176 as amended, and move the amendment number is 2023-2299H. And I could speak to that if we have the option.
I recognize Representative Lewicki.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we judge House Bill 176 to be ought to pass as amended with amendment 2023-2299H.
Mr.
And I
Chairman?
recognize Representative Harrington to discuss
Thanks.
this amendment and tell us how it is different from the original bill.
Yeah, this kind of goes back a long time. There was a bill passed dealing with the Site Evaluation Committee, specifically having to do with new requirements for wind projects. It put in things like emergency plans and other things that were subscripted in law, and told the Site Evaluation Committee to rewrite the rules to accommodate the new bill. Well, they did that, but they kept going. And they applied the sections that only apply to wind projects to all energy projects, transmission projects, new types of generation, whatever it was. They applied it to it. And that was a beyond what the law authorized them to do. So the original bill that came out basically said, here's the areas where you overstepped your authority specifically, but you also ought to check all the rest of your rules to make sure they comply with the law. It was discussed and thought that was too broad. So what the amendment does is it just narrows it down to the specific sections where the law was not followed, and it says fix your rules to match the law, and only in these sections that are listed in the new amendment, and not a general review all your rules.
Okay, Representative McGee.
So I have a question, Representative Harrington. Can you, since we're just, we just received the amendment recently, we've looked at it, we've looked online at the statute, but can you just explain for us here what changes will result from these? Not in a general way that they'll be able to make their own rules, but what does this order them to do in terms of changing the statute?
As far as that goes, there is no change. What it does is it limits them to specifically what was listed in the original bill, but it takes out the look at all your rules as well. So specifically, it talks about it's the site rule, which exceeds the authority of the committee by requiring the committee to conduct an adjudicative hearing prior to exempting an applicant from approval and certificate provisions of 162H. And then there's another rule that says requires the proposed energy facility to include a visual impact. Such impact is required for wind energy systems only under RSA blah, blah, blah. There is no such requirement RSA 162H7, which applies to all energy facilities. And then the last one goes on, then two more, goes on to say that require all energy facilities to have a sound assessment and fire protection plan, which are required only for wind energy facilities under the law, and high-pressure gas pipelines under another section of the law. And finally, it requires all energy facilities to have an emergency response plan. There is no such requirement in 162H. So basically what it does is it tells the site evaluation committee that, well, we really don't ruling on whether these ideas are good or bad or should be in place or shouldn't be in place. The fact is the law doesn't authorize you to do it, so it says follow the law. As simple as that.
You have a follow-up, Representative McGee?
Yes, I think, this is kind of illustrative of what the issue is with having a late-breaking amendment on a bill that has been batted around on both sides of the House and with multiple vehicles, right? This was a bill that was identified as ITL or interim study early on, and we hadn't really paid much attention to. And now, the way I look at it, we're saying that the Site Evaluation Committee is not able to undertake any inputs in their adjudicative proceedings that are not spelled out in the law. But I don't see how this improves what we have done, and I think it needs more gestation within this committee so that we have an understanding of what we're asking them to do, rather than, again, having this come at this late time. So I'm not in favor of passing this because there was ample time to present such amendments during the SEC hearings that we had with other vehicles this year.
Representative Harrington.
Yeah, just again, so we're clear. This is the only thing that was changed in the bill from as introduced. The as introduced bill in paragraph 2 said, in order to amend the rules pursuant to section 1 of this act, the committee shall include but not be limited to the following. That but not be limited to has been removed. So there's nothing new coming in here. This is exactly the same as it was when it was introduced, whenever it was last year. The only thing we did was we shrunk down the scope of the bill to specifically talk about the things where the Site Evaluation Committee exceeded their authority, and they simply don't create law, they implement law. And if there's a requirement that says wind facilities must have an emergency response plan, but there's no requirement for any other type of facility to have it, the Site Evaluation Committee shouldn't be imposing that because they think it's a good idea. If they think it's a good idea, they can come back to this committee and propose legislation, and we can put that in. But they don't have the authority to install these things on their own. And in fact, if it went to the Site Evaluation Committee and they required them to do that, I'm sure some developer would take them to court and win because they're saying, you're acting outside of your authority. There's no law that gives you the authority to require this. And all this does is say, make the rules comply with the law, period. And nothing's changed since it was originally introduced. All it's done is limit the scope down to saying we got rid of include but not limited to. That's come out. That's it.
So GELCAR probably should have picked this up when they originally reviewed the site evaluation committee rules,
Could I-
but somehow they missed it.
Could I
They
comment
didn't
on that,
realize
Mr. Chairman?
that. Go ahead,
I
Representative Harris.
talked to a senator who's actually no longer a senator at the time who was on GELCAR. I was not on this committee, nor was I on the site evaluation committee at the time. And I brought this to his attention, and he basically said, we've been screwing around with those rules for so long. No one understands them anyways. We're going to pass them as is just to get them off of our desk. And that's what happened. So they blew it, and they didn't want to address the issue.
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do recall when we had our public hearing on this bill that we specifically identified, or these 4 items were specifically identified as problems. And hence, I think this amendment is in order. It doesn't make sense for us to kick this can down the road any farther. Let's just fix this.
Further discussion, Representative Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this amendment, and when I compared it to the original bill, I see the same reference to rules. But I think there may be a drafting error. If you look at line 18, and it references regulation site 301.08C1 and 3, the way it's worded, it suggests that those rules require all energy facilities. But if you actually read the rule, it specifically says that those rules relate only to high pressure gas pipelines. So, that being the case, I mean, I think this is the way it's worded is an error. So that is I think that's just a drafting error. And on a more substantive note, if you look at line 16, it says there is no requirement in RSA 162H7 to permit visual impact assessments. Well, there is nothing that specifically says that they can do visual impact assessment, but RSA 162H7 provides broad authority for the site evaluation committee to regulate, quote, any aspect of the construction or operation of a facility and the impact on the environment. So that, to me, would give them the authority if they felt the need to look at a visual impact assessment. So I don't think, paragraph B is necessary because of what I just said. And as I said, paragraph C, I think, is just out and out incorrect in terms of its reference to the incorrect regulation.
Any further discussion? Representative McGee.
And just kind of put a pin on that note that Representative Munns just made. What this brings to mind is the fact that we're saying that the SEC should not have any authority beyond what we have spelled out in the statute. However, they are the body that we've assigned to do site evaluation. And so the general authority that's being pulled back, I think it needs more work, more discussion, and not to be something that we are pushing through at the last minute, assuming that it's going to fix problems with the SEC. I think we have to have more fulsome discussions around what those problems are that we're trying to solve, rather than just shoving some language in at the last moment that, again, we have questions about. And this was not a vehicle that we were working on throughout this period in terms of a retained bill status. So I really don't see any reason to change the status that we had for this bill.
So Representative McGee, you keep talking about last minute language thrown our way. This bill was introduced last February, so this language has been around since then, with the exception of the 3 or 4 words that this amendment removes from the original statute. So
That is
I think
accurate,
that's a
Mr. Chairman.
mischaracterization to say that this
is
hasn't been
accurate, Mr.
around.
Chairman, but in all of our meetings, this bill was ITL and/or interim study. So there was no consideration of this bill moving forward until this week.
Further discussion, Representative Kaplan.
Yeah, just speaking to this amendment, and I appreciate Representative Harrington's desire to, set things in order in terms of the rules governing the Site Evaluation Committee. But, given what he just said about the way they operate, I am concerned that this would have unintended consequences. For instance, just the requirement of having an emergency response plan. Okay, maybe that only by law is required of certain facilities, but to my mind, it seems like a good idea for all facilities to have an emergency response plan, as it would for any organization. So are we then saying that it's not necessary to have an emergency response plan if we say, if we pass this amendment? So that's just one confusion that I think needs to be straightened out. So I agree with Representative McGee. We need more time to think about it and maybe hear from other experts who would be able to enlighten us about that.
Further discussion, Representative Bernardi.
Yes, this conversation, I guess, ticks one of the fundamental premises of how government is supposed to operate. New Hampshire Constitution provides that the state legislature make laws. We set the policies by making those laws. We do not give administrative agencies the authority to make law, make decisions that are contrary or above and beyond the policy prerogatives that we give them. And so therefore, I find the comments of Representative Munz and Kaplan not in order. This bill basically says this legislature is defining where the agency is to act and how they're to act, and they need to implement that policy.
Additional comments? Representative Munz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Representative Kaplan for highlighting the language in lines 21 and 22, because again, that's a drafting error. If you read 30108C4, it says, and I'm quoting, an explanation of why the setbacks described by the applicant in response to 3 above are adequate to protect the public from risks associated with the operation of high-pressure gas pipelines. Has nothing to do with emergency response plans.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, please.
Representative Harrington.
You're correct. There's a mistake in the drafting, so I suggest we just ITL this, and I'll get those fixed and bring them back next year. I don't see that's going to be any crisis if we don't, but there's mistakes here. Must have been transposing it from the last bill or something on this, because this bill has come up before, and so. But it's as written. It has mistakes. So. No,
Okay, so fast, late breaking. What do they call it on TV? Breaking news. It appears that that we now want to back away from this amendment and this OTPA motion, so that drafting errors or other errors that have been recognized can be addressed. Further discussion? Well, because we have a motion on the floor, we have to vote on it, even though we probably want to back away from it at this point. So I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of OTPA with Amendment 2299H.
A question, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Could I simply
Representative Harrington.
Could I simply withdraw the amendment? Is that possible, or do we have to vote?
Yes, you could withdraw the amendment.
Okay, I withdraw the amendment then.
With you would also have to withdraw the motion about to pass.
And I withdraw the motion about to pass.
Okay, the motion of OTPA has been withdrawn by Representative Harrington. Representative Harrington, you have an alternative motion to make.
Move ITL as originally written.
Representative Summers.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded that we ITL House Bill 176. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL for HB 176. Take your time.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Cal McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Partial,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes, indeed.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bowes,
Yes.
20-0.
Okay, by a vote of 20 to nothing, HB 176 is judged to be ITL. And without objection, we can put that one on the consent calendar. No objections registered, so we will put that on the consent calendar, and Representative Harrington will write the committee report. Okay, with that, we'll close the exec session on HB 176, and now we'll open an exec session on HB 381 relative to the system benefits charge, and I recognize Representative Thomas for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I motion ITL on HB 381.
Recognize Representative Nodder. Moved and seconded that we ITL House Bill 381 relative to the system benefits charge. Representative Doug Thomas, do you want to say anything about this motion?
Now, I will defer to the original drafter of it. This, we just don't we don't think it's needed, and so why vote for it?
This bill would undo House Bill 549 from last year, and I don't think that's a path we want to go down at this point in time. Is there any other discussion needed for this motion of ITL on HB 381? Representative Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Doug
Chair.
Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, on the taller ones, thank you. I just wanted to say that, yes, I agree. A lot of work was done on the previous bill that the chair mentioned. This bill would just undo it, and there's no need for that when we made so much progress before.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL for HB 381.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
No.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Cal McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Partial,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bowes,
Yes.
19-1.
By a vote of 19 to 1, the committee adopts the motion of ITL on House Bill 381. We could consider putting this on the consent calendar unless there's an objection.
There is.
Representative Harrington?
There is.
Okay, so this will not go on the consent calendar. And the ITL motion was made by Representative Thomas, so he will write the committee report for House Bill 381. So we'll close that executive session. Now we'll open a new executive session on House Bill 458 relative to participation in net energy metering by small hydroelectric generators. And I will recognize Representative Ploget for a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I move that we ought to pass amended House Bill 458 with the amendment 2023-2347H. Representative Corman has presented and introduced this amendment earlier today, which keeps the 6 representatives in the committee.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm going to recognize Representative Corman first.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt House Bill 458 as amended with Amendment 2347H. Now, Representative Ploget, you can tell us why you think we should adopt this.
I apologize for the continuation. Yes, now that we have all committee members here, I wanted to bring them up to date that it was introduced, and now instead of having the speaker choose the 6 representatives, 1 from ST&E and 1 from Ways and Means, it is now still 6. It will be 2. This amendment makes it 2 from Ways and Means, 2 from ST&E, and 2 from Municipal. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor then is to adopt this non-germane amendment, which amends the title of the bill by changing it to reestablishing the commission to study the assessing of power generation. And those of you who were at the public hearing earlier this morning fully understand the reason for adopting this bill to extend the life of this commission through November 1st of 2024. Is any further discussion needed? Representative Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support adoption of this bill. The only thing that I would add or encourage is that if we adopt this bill and it gets adopted by the House, that every effort is made to expedite review and approval of the bill by the Senate so that the commission can begin meeting as expeditiously as possible. The reason we actually need this bill is that the prior bill wasn't handled as quickly as possible, and so the commission didn't meet until September, and the commission really wants to get on with its business and meet as early as possible in the year. So anything we can do to expedite that would be much appreciated.
So noted. Representative Wendy Thomas.
And how would one go about expediting that?
As chair of this committee, I would consult with Representative or Senator Tim Lang, who was chair of Ways and Means in the Senate,
Okay.
and let him know that when the bill gets to the Senate, he needs to move it through as quickly as possible. He was the chair of this commission last year, so he's well aware of the issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion needed? Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended with Amendment 2347H, House Bill 458.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Brezhny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Kat McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams.
Yep.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Parshall,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bowes.
Yes.
20-0.
By a vote of 20-0, the committee adopts the motion of ought to pass as amended on House Bill 458. If we put this on the consent calendar, it will get through the House more quickly. Therefore, it can get to the Senate more quickly. So I recommend that we, without objection, we put this on the consent calendar.
Agreed.
Seeing no objections, so moved. And Representative Ploget will write the committee report, possibly with the help of Representative Corman. All right, so now we'll close that exec session and move to a new exec session on House Bill 509 relative to phasing out, or the phasing out, of the minimum electric renewable portfolio standard. And I'll recognize Representative Harrington for a motion.
I move to pass. Ought to pass. All right, I move interim study.
Okay. Representative Berejny.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend House Bill 509 for interim study. Is there any discussion needed on this motion? Representative Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I am a new member of the House, I'd like to know what the implications of moving a bill to interim study are.
Interim study is a recommendation from the committee in the second year of the House for a bill that the committee judges to be unworthy of passage at the moment, but that could be potentially recommended for passage in the future. So once a bill goes into the status of recommended for interim study, the committee can then decide whether it wants to actually study it further and recommend it for future legislation or not recommend it for future legislation. Those are the two motions that the bill will be required, be subject to later in the session or later in the year. So referring the bill for interim study is just a way to allow it to continue, but prevents its passage in this session.
Thank you.
Any further discussion needed? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to
Hey,
call.
hey, hey, my hand was up.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Representative Wendy Thomas.
Just some clarification on the interim study. You actually answered part of my question by the previous answer. Is it done by a subcommittee or is it done by the entire committee, an interim study?
The entire committee will have to, once the bill is passed as into interim study, we'll have to decide at a future date, do we want to study this bill or not? And that'll just be by a vote of the committee.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion? Additional questions? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of refer for interim study on House Bill 509.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
J.D. Bernardi, yes. Tom Pelaget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Kat McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Parshall,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bowes.
Yes.
20-0.
By a vote of 20-0, the committee adopts the motion of interim study on House Bill 509. I'm not sure if we need a committee report for interim study. That's TBD. If we do, I will write it myself. How's that, Representative Harrington?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
Whatever.
If it goes onto the calendar, it will go onto the calendar and on consent, but I'm not sure it goes onto the calendar. I think it may still just reside with our committee, but I'll have to double check that with the clerk. All right, so let's close the exec session on House Bill 509 and now move on to an exec session for House Bill 558-FN relative to electric microgrids and electric grid resiliency. And I'll recognize Representative Thomas for a motion.
I motion we adopt 558 with the amendment 2023-2321H.
Representative Notter.
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
It's moved and seconded. The motion of ought to pass as amended with Amendment 2321H. Representative Thomas chaired a subcommittee on this bill, so tell us what your subcommittee decided.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, it was a good study committee where we discussed the merits of rearranging what the original bill was going to have into basically a study committee for DOE to discuss the merits of microgrids and all the details that would be involved with that. It was a good discussion. We had it was a 4-0 recommendation from the subcommittee to recommend adoption with the motion that I just made, and I think it's a good way to proceed.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment 2321H to House Bill 558? Representative Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple questions relating to the language in lines 19 and 20. And I'll just read it for the record. Evaluation criteria and approval process for utilities to propose a limited number of microgrid pilot projects to the Public Utilities Commission annually. So my questions are, there's two questions really, and hopefully somebody from the subcommittee can answer. This language, the way I read it, it kind of implies that that utilities are going to be the ones that are going to be proposing microgrid projects. And my understanding was that we were looking for private developers to developers or municipalities to propose microgrid projects. So my question is this limiting the ability of non-utilities to propose projects? And then the second question is, it talks about proposing pilot projects annually. And that just seems odd that you would be proposing pilot projects annually. You do a pilot to kind of do a proof of concept, and then you move beyond the pilot to real projects. So I just was kind of curious what the logic was for including that language, that word annually.
Well, it was my impression that this was in there as an option for the study committee to discuss. Those are just one of the items that would be brought under discussion. I don't think there was any intention to say that you would or that you wouldn't. I would have to ask the other subcommittee members if that was their impression as well.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just was looking back at my notes from the hearing where we discussed some changes that Representative Ammon might consider in the amendment that we have before us. And we had discussed instructions to the DOE regarding reporting on federal monies and discussing the value of microgrids. So basically giving us information about what they're finding from their review. Let's see. We also discussed including the US DOE definition of a microgrid because we didn't have that information in statute, and there was a question, what is a microgrid, in that hearing? So I'm just wondering whether any of those notes that came from the hearing got incorporated or were discussed but then decided not to be included in the amendment.
Yeah, we did talk about some of those ideas, and at the time, we felt we wanted to get the study going, and time being what it was, we felt that the amendment that was presented to us, although not perfect, was good enough to go through. And I think we had some discussion with the DOE involving the pilot programs, and their ideas were that they really wanted to work out the technologies before they entered into any pilot program at the time. So this is why some of that is still in there as being discussed, and that's why we felt that in the interest of this important project to get going, the amendment as presented was enough to get us through. And anything that has to be tweaked, obviously, could be done at a later date. But yes, those ideas were talked about. There were many of them, but that's what the study committee is for, is to discuss these things.
Thank you. That's fair.
And line 16, Representative McGee, of the amendment says that definitions and technical requirements to qualify as a microgrid is part of the department's investigative proceeding. In general, a bill that requires the DOE to open an investigative proceeding can provide guidance, but it's probably not going to touch on every single thing that an investigative proceeding might reveal. So I think that nitpicking the language on line 16 through 30 would probably not serve us well. Representative Berezhny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just point out the last one says any other relevant issue raised in the department's investigation proceeding. So it basically covers anything.
That is correct. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended.
Excuse me,
by
Chair.
Representative Noel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still wondering about Representative Munz's first question about the utilities leading the process. Again, being deregulated and not responsible for generating power anymore. I'm curious how the utilities get to be the ones who decide that.
Well, I think that's a good question, and it's something that the investigative proceeding will explore and come to conclusions about. So we'll just have to see what the investigative proceeding reveals about whether it should be utilities or somebody else. Representative Ploget.
Thank you, Chair. Not to belabor this any longer, but the line 16, along with 19, if I remember right, when I attended the subcommittee, these microgrids are going to be interconnected with the utilities. The utilities will be working with the municipals and businesses. They're, from the way I read line 18, once they get that, if it's can advance or not, they will do that reporting and propose it. I don't read it myself because of line 16 that they're just proposing their own. They're still working with the municipals and businesses, since they're going to be tied into the utilities grid also. It's not a standalone. Thank you.
Representative Wendy Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a general comment about the format of this bill. On lines 22, 24, 26, and 28, an Oxford comma is used. And I had a big discussion with the clerk about Oxford commas, and he said, oh, no, they're not used in New Hampshire. which is why, because I said the name of our committee should be Science, Technology, and Energy. Anyway, it's a minor nit. However, I would like to know if you are aware of a state of New Hampshire style guide anywhere.
I've never seen one. There must be one in OLS, though, I would guess.
I'll check and I will get back to you, or to everybody.
Any further discussion? Representative Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard a lot of the discussion about, the way the language being drafted, giving the department the flexibility to look into various things. And I guess I'm willing to concede that. But I also am reminded of a comment that one member of our committee made on the discussion about a previous bill, that, the legislature kind of sets the policy and tells everyone what to do. Language matters. I just would have been more comfortable if we'd been a little bit more specific with the direction that we're providing to the Department of Energy. But I trust that they will, take as an expansive view of this issue as possible.
Representative McGee.
I'll just add, by way of easing people's concerns, that I think in the first section, starting on line 8, within 120 days of effective date, the department shall initiate a proceeding to investigate potential benefits, risks, and key considerations around developing a framework for electricity grids in the state. In doing so, the department shall consult with electric distribution utilities, microgrid technology companies, distributed generation project developers, high-density load businesses, municipalities, one or more state universities, and other relevant entities. So I think that precursor really sets up the idea that it's going to be a stakeholder process that will get all the people in the room that need to be in the room.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ought to pass as amended with Amendment 2321H, House Bill 558-FN.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Plauché,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Kat McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Partial,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bose,
Yes.
20-0.
Okay, by a vote of 20-0, ST&E adopts House Bill 558-FN as ought to pass as amended by Amendment 2321H. Without objection, I think we could put this on the consent calendar. Hearing no objection, that will be so moved. And Representative Thomas will write the committee report for House Bill 558-FN. And with that, we'll close the exec session on HB 558 and open an exec session on House Bill 609-FN. And I will move ought to pass as amended by Amendment 2023-2368H. And I'll recognize Representative McGee.
And I will second that motion.
It's moved and seconded that we judge House Bill 609-FN as worthy of ought to pass as amended by Amendment 2368H. And I will speak to the motion that I made to adopt this amendment. Our subcommittee met 3 times to discuss the changes that are in the amendment that you are looking at right now, Amendment 2368H. It makes several significant changes to the Site Evaluation Committee. It reduces the number of the members of the committee from 9 to 5. It sets those 5 members as 3 members of the PUC, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services, and a public member who is appointed by the governor and approved by the council. It sets a quorum for the meetings of the Site Evaluation Committee at 3 people, unless those 3 people are the Public Utilities Commissioners. They alone cannot constitute a quorum, according to the language on line 20 of the amendment. The Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services and/or the public member would be required to join 2 other people to constitute a quorum. The committee also, the chairperson of the committee, who will be the chair of the Public Utilities Commission, can delegate to other members the duties of presiding officer on a case-by-case basis, including the administrative actions of the committee to that presiding officer. Another big change that the amendment makes is to change the definition of the Site Evaluation Committee administrator. This amendment makes that person an employee of the Public Utilities Commission who can float between doing duties for the Public Utilities Commission or the Site Evaluation Committee with a preference for Site Evaluation Committee duties, or a priority for Site Evaluation Committee duties. And whenever the administrator performs duties for the SEC, they will be funded as set forth in other parts of RSA 162H that basically follows the model that the administrator is paid by today. This will relieve a lot of the funding pressure that currently exists on the Site Evaluation Committee. They have a full-time administrator, but they don't have a way to pay him. By being an employee of the Public Utilities Commission, that person will get a regular paycheck. And I'm sure he or she will appreciate that. The other changes that the amendment makes are basically language changes to add designated presiding officer to existing language in the statute. And the statute also, because it repeals the need for subcommittees, it makes some language changes on page 4, lines 24 through 30, to remove the mention of a subcommittee. And there was a reference on page 4, starting at line 32, the funding plan. There was a reference on page 5, actually, line 3, to a section of the law that no longer exists, so that had to be removed as well. So those are the changes that this amendment makes. After extensive discussion with the subcommittee, we believe that these changes will significantly improve the timeliness of the Site Evaluation Committee's deliberations and its processing of the applications that are made for a site certificate. We also believe that it will reduce the cost of those applications by improving the timeline and getting those applications dealt with more promptly. So we think this is a good amendment as written, As you can see, the amendment is sponsored by all 5 members of our subcommittee. We recommend its adoption. And I'd like to hear your discussion of this amendment. We'll start with Representative Wendy Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 609, as we first got it, had a fiscal note, and you just mentioned that this amendment will include the funding of a position. So does that mean the fiscal note will be amended to reflect this?
If we adopt this amendment and the bill moves forward, the fiscal note will be revised, yes.
And do you have an idea of the cost? I mean, I'm not, the cost to fund that position, do you have an idea of how much that would be?
I can't answer that, no.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Harrington.
Yeah, but just caution people on this. Let's not give up the good to find the perfect. I think I'm the only one that's actually served on a site evaluation committee, and I served on 7 or 8 of them, and they're a mess. They go on and on and on, hours of trying to schedule things, get people together. They stretch out for months upon months upon months, and it sends a message to people, don't come to New Hampshire because it's too confusing and too complicated to invest here. So this is a big step in the right direction. It may not be perfect. We may be back here, or someone back here 2 or 3 years from now saying, well, we've been using this, but we can make some more tweaks to make it better. That's probably going to happen. But again, let's not hold off for perfect when we have good, and this is a good step in the right direction.
Thank you. I think it's important to point out that this amendment to the Site Evaluation Committee process, while it makes some changes, the vast majority of the existing process continues to exist and will move forward. It will be the process by which site certificates are evaluated, by which the public will participate in the siting process. So it's important to keep that in mind, that while these changes are important, the vast majority of RSA 162H remains in effect. Now, we already modified part of RSA 162H with HB 281 back earlier this year. And those amendments are now part of existing statute. Those were important amendments because they clarified the role of state agencies in this process. That has been done, and this amendment continues the process of reforming the Site Evaluation Committee in such a way as to make it more effective. Representative Thomas has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, just like what you said, I just wanted to add that this is a prime example of a bill that had an extremely lively public hearing when it was first brought up, and the work efforts on both sides of the parties has resulted in significant progress in small steps, but significant nonetheless. And I think this is an excellent example of how the hard work that was done between both sides in getting something actually done that will actually improve the process.
Representative Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to repeat something I said in our subcommittee meeting, which is something that doesn't happen very often. I agree with the remarks from Representative Harrington.
And the Patriots still lost. Representative Munns. Representative Munns, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said a few minutes ago, words do matter, and I think this is an exceptionally well-written amendment. So no objections there, and I also believe that it will help to expedite the review and approval of much needed projects going forward. So I commend the study committee.
Representative Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is narrowing down from 9 down to 5, and except in the case of where there's only one commissioner from the PUC present to make quorum, was it the intention to have a majority number of PUC members over everybody else?
Not sure I understand the question, but
So to verify, if there's 4 members and you have two PUC and one of each of the other, the PUC outnumbers them. If there's 3 members and 2 of them are PUC, So all the cases except for the case where there's only one PUC member, the PUC would always outnumber the other members in that quorum of 5. Was that the intention? That's what I was asking.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, yes. Representative Nodder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for you. When the subcommittee met, were members of the public present at the subcommittee that were here for the original bill?
Yes, all of the subcommittee members were noticed in the calendar and were open public meetings held in this room, in fact.
Follow up?
Follow up.
In my notes, there was one woman who was adamantly opposed to this bill because she doesn't like wind. Does this amendment satisfy? Her name is Lisa Leno. I know you know her. I'm not sure how to say her name. Leno? Lisa Leno?
She did not attend any of the subcommittee meetings.
Thank you.
Representative Wendy Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just clarification. I'm getting some concern from people about lines 13 and 16 where it moves from committee to chairperson or designated presiding officer. The concern is, and it might be legitimate or not, that chairperson now has too much authority and is almost in a dictatorial position. So is that a concern?
I don't believe it is. No one ever raised that issue in the subcommittee meetings that we had. We heard from members of the DOE, we heard from members of the Public Utilities Commission, we heard from various other parties, and that issue was never raised.
Should it have been?
Should it have been? Not to my understanding, no.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Representative Harrington.
Yeah, just to be clear on this, the being the chair of the committee is just an administrative function only. They get one vote just like everybody else. So there's nothing, they don't have any extra power. It simply means someone has to set up the scheduling and all the other stuff, and that's what themselves responsible
So
for.
they can't hold back a vote or anything like that?
I wouldn't know.
Representative Thomas, Wendy Thomas, please don't speak unless you're called on by the chair.
My experience, there's always been a chair, and there's never been a situation where the chair stood up and said, we're not going to vote on this and we're not going to do that, because the rest of the committee could simply say, well, we are. And if they have the votes, they can get it done.
Do you need to make a further comment now?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention that in those hearings, the amendment that we were considering when we first started the hearings had a different person than the head of the PUC as the chair of the SEC. And so the amendment that we were considering, which I favored, said that the appointed attorney on the Public Utilities Commission would be the chair of the SEC. And then there were several people who came up to testify saying that that might not be administratively a good thing. But many of the people who I think proposed that, and myself included, I didn't propose it, but I agreed that I thought that separation of leadership would have been a good thing. So to your question, we did discuss it. There was some opposition to it, but it didn't carry through to this amendment.
Further discussion on this question? Well, seeing none, it looks like we're ready to vote on the question of ought to pass as amended by Amendment 2368H of House Bill 609. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Doug Thomas.
Yes.
Janine Nodder.
Yes.
Michael Harrington.
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy.
Yes.
John Lewicki.
Yes.
Lex Brezhny.
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget.
Yes.
James Summers.
Yes.
Kat McGee.
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams.
Yes.
Jackie Cretion.
Yes.
Lucius Parshall.
Yes.
Tony Kaplan.
Yes.
Chris Munns.
Yes.
Henry Noel.
Yes.
Wendy Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas Corman.
Yes.
Angela Brennan.
Yes.
Chairman Bose.
Yes.
20-0.
Okay, by a vote of 20-0, the committee adopts HB 609 as ought to pass as amended with Amendment 2368H. And while it would be tempting to put this on the consent calendar, I think it would probably be pulled off by someone. So this will go on the regular calendar, and I will write the committee report for HB 609. With that, we'll close the public hearing on House Bill, or the executive session rather, on House Bill 609. And we'll open a exec session on House Bill 616. And I will recognize Representative Harrington for a motion.
Yeah, I move to ITL.
Representative Summers.
I second that motion.
It's moved and seconded that we ITL HB 616. Representative Harrington, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, very briefly, we just interim studied 509, which deals with the same issue. So there's really no sense in having two bills floating around. Whatever issues are in this could be taken up if and when we decide to do something with 509. So this bill is not necessary.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I guess we can vote on the question of ITL on House Bill 616 FN. Mr. Clerk, are you ready? Yes. Please call the roll.
Doug Thomas,
Yes.
Janine Nodder,
Yes.
Michael Harrington,
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy,
Yes.
John Lewicki,
Yes.
Lex Berejny,
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Ploget,
Yes.
James Summers,
Yes.
Cam McGee,
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams,
Yes.
Jackie Cretion,
Yes.
Lucius Parshall,
Yes.
Tony Kaplan,
Yes.
Chris Munns,
Yes.
Henry Noel,
Yes.
Wendy Thomas,
Yes.
Thomas Corman,
Yes.
Angela Brennan,
Yes.
Chairman Bose,
Yes.
20-0.
By a vote of 20-0, the committee adopts the recommendation of ITL on House Bill 616-FN. Without objection, I think this can go on the consent calendar. Hearing no objection, so moved. This bill will go on consent, and Representative Harrington will write the committee report. And with that, we'll close the exec session on HB 616 and open an exec session on House Bill 622 FN. And I will move ought to pass as amended and offer Amendment 2292H. And I'll recognize Representative McGee.
I'll second that motion.
It's moved and seconded that we judge HB 622 to be worthy of ought to pass as amended by Amendment 2292H. And I will speak to that amendment. So when we were having the committee discussions on House Bill 281 this past spring, it was suggested that if the Easy Board was repealed, the statute covering the Easy Board was repealed, that it might be worthwhile to try to capture some of the knowledge and some of the institutional knowledge and other expertise of the people who were on the Energy Board in another fashion. And it was suggested that the Grid Modernization Advisory Group, which had just been passed in an earlier bill, I think it was Senate Bill 166, might be a good place for that to happen. So this bill, or this amendment rather, creates within the Grid Modernization Advisory Group the additional responsibility of exploring methods of modernizing, streamlining, and finding efficiencies in the delivery of energy efficiency programs and incentives with the goal of maximizing the consumer benefit of existing state, federal, and utility funding streams. That's what the amendment does. It changes the bill completely, changes the title from its previous title of relative to administration of the New Hampshire repealing the Energy Efficiency and Sustainable Energy Board to relative to the Grid Modernization Advisory Group. Any questions about the amendment or comments? Seeing none, I guess we're ready to vote. If you're ready, Mr. Clerk, please
Yes.
call the roll on the motion of OTPA with Amendment 2292H.
Doug Thomas.
Yes.
Janine Nodder.
Yes.
Michael Harrington.
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy.
Yes.
John Lewicki.
Yes.
Lex Berejny.
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Plauget.
Yes.
James Summers.
Yes.
Kat McGee.
Yes.
Rebecca McWilliams.
Yes.
Jackie Cretion.
Yes.
Lucius Parshall.
Yes.
Tony Kaplan.
Yes.
Chris Munns.
Yes.
Henry Noel.
Yes.
Wendy Thomas.
Yes.
Thomas Corman.
Yes.
Angela Brennan.
Yes.
Chairman Bose.
Yes.
20-0.
Okay, the committee adopts House Bill 622 FN as amended by Amendment 2292H by a vote of 20 to nothing. And this bill, I think, also might benefit from being placed on the consent calendar. Is there any objection? Seeing none, it'll go on the consent calendar.
It's as an FN, so it may need to go then. Right, can't go consent, it's got to go to fiscal first.
Well, that was the original bill.
That's true.
I'm not sure that the amended bill needs
any
to
money,
be
yep.
FN.
Yep.
I will consult with the clerk, and if the clerk gives us permission, we'll put it on the consent calendar. And I will write the committee report for this legislation. And with that, we'll close that executive session. And now we're down to our final executive session of the day. We've done remarkable work here so far this morning. So let's keep the roll going. I'll open the exec session on House Bill 631 FN, and I'll call on Representative Thomas for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion on HB 631 is ITL.
Representative Bernardi.
I second the motion.
It's moved and seconded that we judge House Bill 631 to be worthy of ITL. Representative Thomas, do you want to comment on your motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. On the surface, this bill would look like it's okay because it's just an enabling bill. It gives people options. But when you look at the bill, it talks about smart meters, and it doesn't. Again, we've had this discussion over the last several many years. It doesn't really define what a smart meter is. And then in addition, we learned that in order for a smart meter to work the way that people would like it to work, there are additional software and items that need to be put behind it, which don't exist right now. And the utilities, especially Eversource, is not set up to provide that in that type of support. So we're looking at a bill that would enable someone to get a smart meter if they want, but if they get it, they really can't use it because there's nothing behind it to support it. And there are very many analogies that are being made. It's my analogy is like selling someone an 8K TV when you only have 4K broadcasting capability. It's really not much of use, and there are other analogies out there that can be used the same way. So this bill really doesn't add anything to the state of New Hampshire, and in my opinion, it's just a useless bill. So for that reason, we should just ITL it.
Further discussion, Representative McGee.
I didn't know if Dr. Cretion wanted to speak. No, she doesn't. Okay. So this was really a priority bill in that we were looking for a way to help folks get on the early adoption bandwagon and even fast follower bandwagon with technology in a way that was not mandated. And so the idea that the bill is not specific enough in terms of identifying what type of smart meter gateway devices would be appropriate. We are leaving, like we often do, to the utilities who actually understand what the landscape is out there with these devices, to the point that if the utilities are not currently set up to read those devices, that it would not be a useful thing for individuals to be able to adopt them. That is not what we have heard from people who are already using smart meter gateway devices. So there is a way, there is a potential for, if this bill were passed, we would be telling the utilities that they need to accommodate this. And then we would find that those solutions do exist. There are people that are using them already. They use them with software applications that they can download on their phone. So they don't need the utility to be able to help them read that information and use that information to do energy efficiency. So I will not be voting to ITL this bill. I will still be looking OTP, which is what we had sort of discussed early on. I understand the points that are being brought up, but I don't think they're sufficient to kill this bill and make us delay further.
Representative Berezhny.
I guess the issue or the question I would have is, so this isn't about smart meters, it's about gateway devices specifically, which is the device that goes after the smart meter or connects to the smart meter and allows the utility to control devices in the home. But if the utility doesn't have a way to talk to that device or doesn't have any software, it's not very useful. But even if, like you said, if a person has software themselves that they run to control the device would still need information from the utility, like either if there's a demand currently, or what the price is of electricity right now. But the utility doesn't do dynamic pricing or real-time pricing, so there's no way to respond to the current price to either turn things off or turn them on. So I guess I'm not really sure. You said that there are users who are using this. Can you give an example of something that somebody's done with a gateway device in New Hampshire with a utility that was beneficial?
Sure. I guess, Eversource is kind of an outlier. They're the largest electricity supplier, but they're not the only electricity supplier. And the New Hampshire Co-op has had their customers on meters with gateway devices. And I believe Unitil also has advanced metering and the capability to provide people with additional information. There's also a pending docket at the PUC to approve the building of the data hub or the statewide energy data platform, which would allow people to access utility data sliced different ways, and they wouldn't have to get it necessarily through the utilities directly. So what this is doing is trying to enable technologies that will help us get further down the road without, like I said, further delay. People are not going to buy these devices unless they have a way that they want to use them. I would imagine that even the Community Power Coalition is also hoping that folks will advance the technology so that they can have something to tie into and help people with monitoring their energy.
Further, Representative Berezhny.
Yeah, so I think I remember during the hearings for this bill, I think it was somebody from Eversource. They mentioned that if this were to pass, they would have to spend money to resource, figuring out which devices they're going to use, and then provide support and make sure that they can, get enough of those devices. And that doesn't seem to make sense if they don't offer the service. Other utilities might offer the service, and it makes sense for them to sell a device, but if a utility doesn't offer the service of talking to the device, what would be the point of having them spend money and procure these devices to offer them to customers if there's no, if they don't intend to or don't currently offer the service?
Representative McGee.
Thanks. It's a good question. And my understanding is that Eversource does have plans to eventually move towards smarter meters than they have now. That infrastructure effort is a number of years away. But at this point, if folks were able to invest in their own individual devices towards that effort, they would have to make a decision around what would be a standard that they could settle on so that it would accommodate that future technology. That's kind of what we're asking them to do with the bill, is to say, you're not thinking about this now, but we want you to be thinking about this now so that people can have the option. And they could certainly pass through saying, these these are the meters that we advise you to have. They don't have to have them in stock. They just have to make sure that people know what they should be buying.
Representative Harrington, did I see your hand up? No. Representative Cretion.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, my understanding is also that Eversource in the other states where it operates does offer these devices, and it's sort of just dragging its feet in New Hampshire because it can. So I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to push them a little bit here.
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Eversource is going to make a move to offer this ability to connect and provide this service, then this bill is not necessary. We've had Unitil and we've had the Power Cooperative, others put this service and capability out there. They didn't require any legislation to do it. I don't believe we need to legislate in this area either. You know, let the market just move forward on its own.
Further discussion, Representative Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we have here is somewhat of a trying to define which one is a cart and which one's the horse. Smart meters as a means to getting us to demand pricing is something that I see as very necessary. And I see demand pricing is also something we need, is very necessary to really try to flatten the curve that we have and try to reduce demand so we don't have all these power generators always running in response to what might be a peak demand. We need to flatten this curve. We need to minimize resources, and by offering demand pricing, we'll get there. Now, which one comes first, the smart meter or the decision that we're going to develop the software? I don't have the ability to demand that Eversource begins the later process, but this is something we can put in right now, saying that we can front load this by supporting this bill. So I'll be voting to support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Representative Bernardi's comment about letting the market settle this, utility customers don't get to choose their utility except if they move. So, you know, if I'm an Eversource customer and I want Eversource and I want a smart meter gateway device and Eversource isn't providing one, the only way I can get one is to move.
Further discussion, Representative Berezny.
Yeah, I'll just make one last comment. So if Eversource, for example, takes another 3 years to roll out the support for this and you buy a device this year, well, 3 years from now, your device is probably going to be outdated and there's probably a better one to buy. So it makes sense that you buy the device when the service is actually offered.
Further discussion, Representative Bernardi.
So to follow up on Representative Corman's comment, if the customer base is interested in this and presents their views to Eversource, that will drive this. We do not need to do this by legislation.
Representative Wendy Thomas.
However, if there's no incentive for the utilities to develop this capability, because it will cost money, and they're not big on that, you know, I see this bill as just lighting a fire under the utilities and saying, you know, build it now and they will come.
Further discussion, Representative Doug Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue I have with this bill is that it appears to be a presumption that naturally we want to go to demand pricing. And I don't think this state has made that policy yet, nor would I support that per se. So yeah, I think I would, in deference to the comments on technology, I would have to agree with Representative Berezny that if someone can go out and buy something now that's not usable now, but might be usable in 5 years, he's going to find out that whatever they bought is probably going to be obsolete. I don't think we should be, in my opinion, I don't think we should be trying to incentivize an idea that has not yet been adopted by the state with a bill that would perhaps artificially give people the impression that we are going to do this, and they'll go out and buy something on their own to find out that it's not being used yet. We need to wait until, policy is set and that till we figure out what we are going to do, what makes sense to do, and that's the primary reason why I'm against this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my opinion, under the present regime, where you can separate your electricity cost from the transportation cost, then this would require coordination between your supplier as opposed to your transportation provider. Because clearly, if you're buying your electricity from Joe Blow's independent electricity company, then that's the one you'd have to coordinate with to do demand pricing as opposed to the utility.
Representative Kennedy.
Yeah, just couple of newbie questions. One, I understood that Eversource is the company that manages the grid, period. They buy electricity from lots of other people, but if you wanted something like a smart meter to work, I mean, wouldn't they have to do it? The second question, I see people saying no, so maybe that's not true. The second question is, when you had discussions on this bill, did Eversource testify? I mean, what was their opinion?
So the answer to your first question is Eversource is the biggest utility in the state, but they don't manage the grid. No one utility does. The answer to your second question is, did they testify? Yes, they did, and they were opposed to this bill when they testified. Further discussion. Representative Summers.
I guess my biggest question, I'm kind of relaying off of what JD said earlier is without this legislation, we've had multiple utilities be able to enable and apply smart metering devices to folks' homes. And they were able to do that without any legislation whatsoever. And from my understanding, is this bill basically pointing to one utility? And so we're asking the state to tell this one utility what to do? And is that the only purpose of this bill?
Representative McWilliams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out two really important things. First, we're in a captive market. And so the decisions that we, the members of ST&E, make actually do have an impact on the market. And that's part of our job as elected representatives to make market changes. So that certainly is something that's underlying the entire discussion about this bill is, do we want to force one of the players in the market to make a change? The second piece I think is just as important. What we're talking about is people who are on the cutting or potentially even bleeding edge, okay? So when we talk risk reward, the people who are taking a risk with this bill are individual citizens of New Hampshire who are deciding they want to spend their own money and get a smart device. And they want to find out what that means and perhaps even change their behavior. That's their risk. And so they take that risk for the next 3 or 5 years, and technology can change and it becomes obsolete. And we all know that's just the way of the world. But nonetheless, the risk is on the individual purchaser. We're not forcing anything. We're not increasing costs. We're not spreading this out across other people and saying, oh, we want to support this effort by making everyone pay more so some people can get smart devices. That's not what we're doing. We're asking for a recommendation, specifically from Eversource, for what smart meter device they think people should purchase if and when they take their own risk and make that purchase. And for that reason, I absolutely support this bill because we should be pushing the market. Thank you.
Representative Kaplan.
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't support this legislation. And the reason for that is I think it's wrong-headed. I just think it's not our job to micromanage utilities and tell them what products they need to be offering their customers. I think if we want to change the market, that's what our job is as a legislature, and that is to change the way the market functions. And I'm a strong believer that demand-side response is an important component in saving people's money and lowering the climate implications of the way we use energy. So if we want demand side to be a part of the way the market functions, that's our job as a legislature, is to set that up. So that's how it functions. not by telling the utilities to offer a certain product to a particular class of customers and putting all the weight of changing the way the energy system functions on a group of pioneering customers who are going to, change the world. That's not the way it's going to work.
Representative Harrington.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm a little confused at what the bill is trying to accomplish. It talks about putting in smart meters, undefined exactly what that is, and whether there's any software that has to be required with that and how it's used. But as long as we don't have time of day rates, if you're paying whatever it is, let's just make it up, 20 cents a kilowatt hour, 24/7, all the time, having a smart meter, I'm not sure what it's doing for you, because you are going to get your power delivered that way, and you're not going to be paying a variable rate with time. I don't know of any supplier now that says there's some very large industrial suppliers that go into the market themselves, and they do by time of day, and the studies I've indicate shows that there's a significant savings there. But we're talking about large industrial users here. For a residential homeowner, they'll have a smart meter. What is it going to do for them? Because they're going to pay the same price of power whether it's 12 noon or 12 midnight or whatever. So I'm just not sure what this accomplishes.
Further discussion. Representative Notter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we have representatives on the committee that would like to tell Eversource what to do, would it be appropriate at this time to ask the Eversource representative or lobbyist to come to the mic to give us a refresher on why they oppose the bill?
I'd prefer not to do that, but is there any further discussion? Representative Berezny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I have a question. So if the purpose of this is to encourage Eversource to at some point provide the real-time pricing or to provide software that will then talk to the gateway device, wouldn't it make sense to legislate then requiring them to do that as opposed to requiring them to offer a device that doesn't work?
Good question. Representative Cretion.
I believe the problem with that is the chicken and egg that we were talking about before. So if we ask them to do that, then they'll say, well, we can't possibly do that because people don't have smart meters. So this is just, again, a way to allow people to express they want this information. They want to be able to engage in this pricing and hopefully encourage Eversource to be responsive to that.
All right, we seem to be going back and forth here. Unless there's a real pressing need, I see no need for further discussion. I think we should just take a vote and see, let the chips fall where they may. Any objection to that? Representative Notter.
Just one more point that I don't think anybody said is anytime we ask, like if we ask Eversource to tell them that they have to spend this money to recoup their costs, we all have to pay for it. It's just going to raise our rates.
Good point. Okay, Representative McGee, did you have a final point?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the bill is that it's the individuals who would spend the money if they want to have a smarter meter than what they have today. It isn't on all the ratepayers to do that. If there are peripheral costs, that's something that we could assess, but that is not the idea of this bill. The idea of this bill is that people who want smart meters would be able to invest in the technology, and then there would be less of a expense for all ratepayers at the time when Eversource decides to transition us over. So because the infrastructure would already be partially upgraded.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the discussion topics on this bill, so I'd like to see us vote. So I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on the question of ITL on House Bill 631.
Doug Thomas.
Yes.
Janine Notter.
Yes.
Michael Harrington.
Yes.
Stephen Kennedy.
Yes.
John Lewicki.
Yes.
Lex Berezny.
Yes.
JD Bernardi, yes. Tom Plauché.
Yes.
James Summers.
Yes.
Kat McGee.
No.
Rebecca McWilliams.
No.
Jackie Cretion.
No.
Lucius Parshall.
No.
Tony Kaplan.
Yes.
Chris Munns.
No.
Henry Noel.
No.
Wendy Thomas.
No.
Thomas Corman,
No.
Angela Brennan,
No.
Chairman Bose.
Yes.
Okay, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 to 9.
By a vote of 11 to 9, the motion of ITL is adopted. And Representative Thomas will write the committee report on this bill, House Bill 631. And with that, I think we can close the exec session on
Mr.
House
Chair?
Bill. Yes, Representative Munns?
Will there be a minority report?
Good question. Does the minority wish to issue a report? Representative McGee?
Yes.
And who will write that report? Representative McGee?
Dr. Cretion.
All right. There will be a minority report written by Representative Chrétien. All right. With that, we'll close the exec session on House Bill 631. And now I'll ask the committee if there is any other business that they would like to address while we're here today, because after we leave here today, we won't be reconvening until after the 1st of January. So is there any other business to come before the committee? Representative Wendy Thomas.
Just like to say happy holidays to everybody and enjoy the time with your families.
Thank you for that good wish. And I would hope everybody would share it. Representative Chrétien.
Just wanted to take the chance to thank everybody who worked on all this legislation in the interim, especially 609 coming to a resolution on that big bill. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Representative Harrington.
Yeah, Representative Corman and myself are going to have to get together and find something to agree on a lot, because otherwise the Patriots are going to lose every game.
Although you guys don't know if that strategy works, because it worked once, but it didn't work the other time. So
Patriots can take 50%.
it's worth a try. It's worth a try. They need all the help they can get. Representative Corman.
Thank you. I just wanted to recognize your work, Mr. Chairman, on HB 609, chairing the subcommittee, meeting 3 times, taking input and being so receptive to input and coming up with a really very good resolution. So thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the members of the subcommittee who worked very, very hard and diligently to put together the final version of that amendment. And I think I really look forward to moving it to the Senate and seeing if we can get it to the finish line and have the governor sign it. I think the governor would be in full support of it. So with that, I guess we're done for the day. Thanks to everybody for being here this morning. Good work. We'll see you after the 1st of the year.